Jared Polin, Photo.com, and this is your
butterfly in the sky
Photo News Fix. This fix is brought to you by Factor and their delicious, never frozen, ready in 2 minutes, ready to eat meals. Now, if you're like me, aka someone who wants to eat healthy but hates the hassle of meal prepping, aka shopping, cooking, and cleaning, and the daily question that wastes so much time, what should I do for lunch today? Then you need to check out Factor. Now stop wasting money on crappy, unhealthy takeout when you can have chef-prepared, ready-to-eat meals in a matter of minutes. In fact, Steven and his wife love having these healthy, ready-made meals around as an affordable, quick, healthy option. Each week, there's over 35 meal options to choose from. There's Chef's Choice, Keto, Calorie Smart, Flexitrition, which I don't know if that means that you flex a lot like me, vegan and veggie, and last but not least, what I personally choose, Protein Plus. I need protein packed meals to feed these bad boys right here. Anyway, to try Factor out, head on over to factor75.com or click the link down below and use the code FRO50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. Again, that code is FRO50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month of orders. Now, before we get to all of the news, I want to say what an insane week for photography that it's been all the way around. From historic images being captured to 2 new massive cameras from Canon. Yeah, not one, but 2. This fix is absolutely packed, so buckle your safety belts and enjoy the ride. First up, as a photographer, you never know when you'll be in the middle of a historic event. You also don't know how you'll react when the stark reality of the moment smacks you right in the face. Well, we learned how 4 photojournalists tasked with covering Donald Trump's campaign stop in Western PA would act. Evan Vucci from the AP, Doug Mills from the New York Times, Anna Moneymaker from Getty, and Jabin Botsford from the Washington Post were the 4 photographers permitted inside the buffer area prior to shots ringing out. Now, as soon as the shots were fired, you can see the photographers jump into action and move towards the stage, not away to safety. When faced with capturing history, they all ran towards the danger zone and not away. And what they captured amounts to nothing short of historic. Anna captured this photo of Trump under Secret Service officers. Doug captured this improbable photo, which is absolutely insane. And Jabin captured his first-person perspective with his Meta Ray-Ban glasses. And finally, with what I am calling one of the most iconic images of a generation, Evan captured this image that more than likely will go on to win a Pulitzer Prize. Each one of these photojournalists continue to capture in the face of danger. Now, to learn what cameras and settings the photographers used, please check out the 16-minute video I posted breaking down the images into further detail. When this video is over, the link is down below. It just talks about the photos and nothing else. Next up, Canon officially announced the long-awaited flagship R1 and surprised everyone at the same time by releasing the R5 Mark II, which seems to be more flagship in some ways than their actual flagship R1.
Please explain.
Now, if you haven't seen our 2 hands-on preview videos just yet, they are long, thorough, and linked down below. But in this fix, I'm gonna hit you with the top-level specs and my thoughts after using them in the I'll call it the real world. It was kind of the real world at a press event. Now let's start with the R5 Mark II. The R5 Mark II sports an all-new stacked, yes, stacked 45 megapixel BSI sensor with readout speeds that are just slightly slower than that of the R3. It's capable of shooting at the same speeds as the R3, which is 30 frames per second in 14-bit RAW with the electronic shutter, and now has pre-shooting of a half a second, but pre-shooting is locked to a half a second, which means every time you take one photo, you're really getting
16!
As long as you had your finger pressed halfway down, buffering those images. There's no way to dial in the desired amount like Sony and Nikon. Now keep in mind, Nikon can't pre-capture RAW, but Canon and Sony can. Now since you're shooting 45 megapixel files at 30 frames per second along with pre-shooting, does the camera have dual CF Express B card slots?
No, probably not.
Nope, it has one SD card slot and one CF Express B slot. Now if you shoot RAW, get ready to wait at least 22 seconds for those files to clear the buffer and write to the SD card, while the CF Express B slot clears in a matter of 2 or 3 seconds. The body remains very similar to that of the original R5, with some minor tweaks to the button placement and the addition of a full HDMI port. But the biggest change to the body is there's now built-in vents on the bottom to help with heat dissipation, and to help even more, there's 3 new grips, with one of them having a built-in fan to suck all that hot air out of the body. Kind of like if I had a fan right here, it would suck all the air out of my mouth because I'm full of hot air.
Is that what you call it?
According to these people. The autofocus, which was already great, has gotten even better thanks to the same dual pixel AF2 and the Digic accelerator. The Digic accelerator.
Accelerator!
This is the same autofocus that the R1 gets, just without cross-type focus points on the sensor, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Now, I do say pure insanity because this autofocus is insane. It gets basically everything that the R1 gets, and we'll be talking about when this story is over. Now, in terms of video, the R5 Mark II is basically a combination of the R5 and the R5C. It can shoot 8K RAW up to 60p internally, and in small RAW, it can shoot full width 4K up to 60p. DCI 4K up to 30p, oversampled from 8K, as well as 2K up to 240 frames per second. You now have Cali lights on the body, 8.5 stops of IBIS 24-bit 4-channel audio, and more. All of this comes in at $4,300. Canon got the R5 Mark II extremely right, and I think it's going to be one of the top-selling cameras for them ever. Speaking of getting things right, let's talk about the specs of the flagship R1. Now you might be wondering why I keep going when I say flagship. Simple.
Just get to it already.
I'll jump right to it. Canon can call this a flagship all they want, but it's pretty much an R3 Mark II. Almost everything about the R1 screams R3 Mark II. Now don't get me wrong, it's a packed camera with some truly mind-blowing features that I give massive props to the engineers back in Japan, but for the past many years, Canon has been saying the R3 is not our flagship, just wait. Well, the wait is over, and I'm still waiting for a flagship. Now let's get to the top level specs. The R3 Mark II, the R1 sports an all new 24 megapixel stacked BSI sensor with a faster readout speed than the R3. Now keep in mind that Nikon's flagship is 45 megapixels and stacked, and Sony's A1 is 50 stacked and shoots at 30 frames per second RAW. Nikon doesn't do RAW. Now in terms of shooting speed, the R1 tops out at 40 frames per second, but it does shoot in 14-bit RAW, whereas the R3 does 12-bit RAW at 30 frames per second. Now wait, did he say tops out? And by he, I mean me? Yeah, 40 frames per second is it. There's no 60, there's no 90, there's no 120. Not even JPEG mode can shoot 120 or over 40 frames per second. And they don't even have the 195 frames per second for 50 shots that the R3 had. Flagship? Sony's A9 III main features are that it has a global shutter sensor and shoots up to 120 frames per second RAW. Those are more flagship specs than the R1 flagship, and that's not even Sony's flagship. The R1 has an ISO range of 100 to 102,400 natively and produces truly clean images at higher ISOs, but we can't open the RAW files just yet. Now with that being said, I shot some 51,200 ISO images that you would think were shot at much lower ISO speeds. Now the R1 sensor is super clean. Now what about pre-shooting? Well, it has it, but like the R5 Mark II's implementation, it's locked at a half a second when it's on. That once again means you get 20 extra frames every time you take one. You can't dial in a tenth of a second to get less pre-shooting frames, nor does it leave a star on the photo on the first photo that you took after the pre-shooting photos. Flagship? Now all these things the Sony A9 can already do. Now there are dual CF Express B card slots, which is nice, but would be needed more with a higher megapixel camera. I kind of would have been fine with one SD card in this one and one CF Express B. The menus have been slightly tweaked, a tally light has been added, the EVF is the biggest, cleanest, best viewfinder I've ever encountered on any camera. It also houses Eye Control version 2, which worked pretty well, but the most mind-blowing, truly flagship features are around the updated autofocus tech. You've got the dual pixel AF2 with all cross-type focusing points on the sensor, the addition of the Digic accelerator, and the introduction of something called Action Priority AF mode that predicts where the action is going to go next and moves the focus to where it needs to go. Now check this out. I've got action priority on, the player is driving the lane and then kicks the ball out to the side where focus is already on the next subject before I can even fully move the camera to the action. Insane is an understatement. Canon's AF was already better than everyone else's on the market. Yes, I just said that. Yes, it's true. No, don't come at me in the comments unless you've used every single Nikon or Canon or Sony camera in the last decade, including the R1 and the R5 Mark II, because I know you haven't just yet. Only these guys can come close to ever commenting about using all those cameras in the last decade. Anyway, what's it cost? $62.99, which is $300 more than the R3 when it was announced. Flagship? That's not even flagship pricing. LOL, it says. Damn it! That's R3 Mark II pricing in my mind. This is just the tip of the iceberg of information on the R1 and the R5 Mark II. Be sure to check out our hands-on previews, which are all linked down below, to get everything in even more detail.
Finally, it took him forever.
And there you have it. That's your photo news fix. Thank you very much for watching. Jared Polin, PhotoNewsPhoto.com. See ya.